All right, so you want to dive deep and you want to learn fast, right? That's why you're here, and that's what we do.
Exactly. And it looks like you've given us some really good material this time around.
Yeah. You shared with us a guide on how to fix common English pronunciation mistakes, and we figured let's take a good look at it in this deep dive.
Yeah, this one's called Common Pronunciation Mistakes and How to Fix Them. And we're going to go through it and figure out some ways to get you speaking more clearly.
And more naturally.
Yes, and I think this one is particularly good because it really focuses on the things that people commonly make mistakes on, even when they're pretty good at English already.
Okay.
So, yeah, and I think, we're going to go through those 5 key areas that it talks about, right?
Yeah, those 5 big ones that everybody has trouble with.
Okay.
So it's the through sounds, and then versus long vowels, and then those silent letters,
Yes.
which are just the worst.
Look how tricky.
And then word stress and how to link sounds together.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, so let's just jump into it. Let's start with the through sounds. Okay.
So the guide points out that people tend to substitute a T sound for the unvoiced, like think becomes tink.
Right.
And then the voiced tick, like in this, often gets replaced by a D sound.
Yeah, I think what's really fascinating about this mistake and how to fix it is that it's so physical.
Yeah.
Like the fix is about changing what you do with your mouth rather than just like, training your ear or anything.
It's like, how do you actually make the sound?
Yes, exactly. So it's correctly pointing out that you need to put your tongue between your teeth.
Yeah.
For both the unvoiced think where your vocal cords don't vibrate and the voiced one like this where they do.
Right.
So yeah, that slight difference and the placement of your tongue.
Right. And it gives a great example sentence for practice.
Oh, yes.
It says, I think this is the right path.
Oh, that's so good.
Which has both of them in there.
Yeah.
So why don't we try saying that out loud?
Okay.
I think this is the right path.
I think this is the right path.
Yeah, you can really feel where your tongue has to go. And it's really interesting when you think about, how language acquisition happens for most people. Like these little changes physically, like actually changing what you're doing with your mouth, are often what gets you to sound less like you're learning a language.
Right.
And more like you're fluent.
Right. Just that one little tiny tweak can make a big difference.
Yes.
Okay, let's move on to mistake number 2, short versus long vowels.
Okay.
So, this is where like the length of time that you spend on a vowel sound can change the meaning of the word.
Yes, exactly. And it gives us some classic examples here, like ship versus sheep.
Right.
And live as in the verb, like I live here, versus leave.
Leave as in go away.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And it's all about the duration of the vowel sound.
Right.
So like the I in ship or the first I in leave are really short and quick, almost clipped.
Right.
But long vowels like the E in sheep or the E in leave are held for longer.
Right, like you stretch it out.
Yes. And linguists call these minimal pairs, which means words that differ by just one sound, and that changes their meaning.
Right, and they give a great example sentence here.
What is it?
I live on a hill, but I want to leave.
Oh, that's perfect.
Yeah, so you can hear the difference.
You can really hear that short I in leave and then that long E in leave.
Right.
It's a great example.
Yeah, and I think it's a good way to practice it too, just to like pay attention to, are you making that distinction in your own speech?
Are you making that conscious effort to hold the vowel sound?
Okay, so let's move on to something that I know a lot of people have trouble with, and I think is kind of ridiculous.
Oh, what's that?
Silent letters.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, why are they there if you're not going to say them?
I know. But a lot of the time it's just because of the history of the English language.
Really?
Yeah, like English has just evolved over so many centuries, and it's taken words from other languages like, French and Greek and Latin. And so sometimes the original spelling of the word stayed the same, but the pronunciation changed. Interesting.
Yeah, and so we're left with these silent letters.
So it's like we're stuck with it from the past, basically.
Pretty much. But what's interesting is that sometimes there are patterns.
Okay.
So you can kind of predict when a letter might be silent.
Yeah.
But not always.
Right.
Yeah, it can be a little tricky.
So it gives us a couple of examples in this guide, like the K at the beginning of knee.
Right.
And then the L in walk.
Nobody pronounces those.
Why are they?
Yeah, and then it also gives this list of common words with silent letters.
Yeah, like Wednesday Island comb.
Yeah, island. That just seems so unnecessary.
I know. It's like, why?
Yeah.
So it seems like you just have to memorize it.
Yeah, to some extent, I think you do. But I think being aware of these silent letters when you are reading can actually help reinforce the correct pronunciation in your mind.
Yeah.
Because, native speakers don't even think about it. We just do it.
Right. Yeah.
But if you're learning the language, it's like, wait a minute, there are all these letters in here that I'm not saying.
I know. And it gives a good sentence here.
Oh, yeah.
I walk quietly on Wednesday nights.
I walk quietly on Wednesday nights.
Yeah. And you hear that silent L and that silent D.
Yeah, those sneaky little letters that you don't even realize are silent.
I know.
All right. Well, okay. So let's move on to mistake number 4, word stress.
All right.
So word stress can really affect how natural you sound, even if you're saying all the sounds correctly.
Yes. And this is where the kind of rhythm of the English language comes into play.
Right.
Word stress means which syllable in a word you emphasize.
Right.
So you make it a little bit louder, and sometimes you hold it for a fraction of a second longer.
Right.
And if you put the emphasis on the wrong syllable, it can sound very unnatural. Mm-hmm. It can even change the meaning of the word sometimes.
Really?
Yeah. And the guide gives a really helpful guideline, which is the noun versus verb rule. And it's not a hard and fast rule. It doesn't work for every single word, but it is a really good starting point.
Okay.
Yeah.
So tell me about this noun versus verb rule.
Okay, so a lot of words can be both a noun and a verb. Okay. And usually the noun will have the stress on the first syllable, and the verb will have it on the second syllable.
Okay, so like record player is record.
Yes.
And then to record something is record.
Exactly. Okay. Yeah. And the example it uses is, I need a FIFO to record the event.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can really hear the difference there.
You can, and it's those subtle things that really make your English sound natural.
Yeah, it's not just about getting the sounds right, it's about where you're putting the emphasis.
Yes.
Okay, so let's move on to our final mistake number 5, linking sounds.
Okay.
This is what makes English sound really smooth and connected.
Yes, and a very common mistake that learners make is to pause between every word, which makes it sound a bit robotic. Yeah, it sounds very choppy.
It does, but natural English involves blending the sounds between words so that they flow smoothly from one to the next. Okay. And it gives some really common examples. Yeah. Particularly in informal English. Yeah. Like, I want to often becomes, I want to, and did you can become did ya.
Did ya, yeah, I hear that all the time.
Yeah, and the practice sentence they give is, I want to meet you later, did you know?
I want to meet you later, did you know? Yeah. Yeah, it all just blends together.
It does, and this is one of those things that when you get it right, it makes your English sound so much more natural. Right. Even if you're still working on other things like vocabulary or whatever.
Yeah, it's all about that flow.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've covered a lot in this deep dive. We've looked at those tricky thrith sounds. Yeah. And you know how you actually have to change how you use your mouth to make those sounds? Right. And then we talked about the difference between short and long vowels and those pesky silent letters. And then word stress.
And that helpful noun-verb rule.
Yes, such a good tip.
I think so too. And then finally, the way that we link sounds together to make our speech smoother.
It's a lot, but it's all really useful stuff.
Yeah, it is. And the guide even gives us a classic tongue twister to practice with.
Oh, what is it?
She sells seashells by the seashore.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one. It really makes you pay attention to all those similar sounds.
It does, and I like that it even invites people to share their most challenging word to pronounce.
Oh, yeah.
Because I think that just shows how common it is for people to get stuck on specific words.
Yeah, and it emphasizes that daily practice is really the key to getting better.
Exactly. It's not going to happen overnight, but if you keep working at it, you will improve.
Yeah, and I think for our listeners, this deep dive has really given you some concrete things to focus on to improve your pronunciation.
Exactly. It's not just general advice, it's very specific.
Yes, it is. And I think it's manageable too. You know, it's not overwhelming.
Right.
Yeah.
So now that we've explored all of these specific elements of pronunciation, you know, the placement of your tongue and how long you hold vowel sounds and those silent letters and the rhythm and the linking sounds. Yeah. What other subtle aspects of spoken English do you think might have a big impact on how clearly you speak and how well you understand?
That's a good question.
I mean, it really makes you realize that there's so much that goes into communicating effectively.
There really is.
It's not just about the words themselves.
No, it's about so much more than that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a whole art form.
It really is.
Yeah.
Wow. Well.
Yeah, food for thought, right?
Food for thought, and hopefully for our listeners, some real strategies that they can take away.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Okay, well, we'll be back with another deep dive soon.
See ya.
Bye.